Beatitudes. We were talking about that 2 weeks ago. We covered the first three. And so we're picking up this week with the blessed are they who hunger and thirst. Okay, so what does it mean to be blessed?
Heavily favored.
Yeah, to receive God's favor, right? Okay. So what's righteousness?
Right thing, right place, right reason.
Doing the right thing in the right way, right motive, to the right degree. Yes, that's righteousness. So what we've talked about, the overall picture that we're looking at here, if we step back, my great artwork, which many of you remember, I think about a spiritual infant down here and a mature believer up here, and the goal is to get from here to here in this life. Remember that? And this is the question is, or the things that we need to know is, well, what does the mature believer look like? What is it God wants us to become as far as and as much as we can in this life? And so one of the challenges that I threw out was, how bad do you care? How bad do you want it? New believer, you're down here, and then you've been growing and getting somewhere along the way. Well, does it matter if by the time you shuffle off this mortal coil, you're all the way up here, or if you're, a third of the way up, well, good enough for you? This becomes the question. Because obviously, if you don't care, you don't care. Or if you say, well, yeah, I'll do it, but as long as it's not too fill in the blank, too difficult, too expensive, too challenging, let's face it, we all are fundamentally lazy in a lot of respects. Sloth is one of the 7 deadly sins for a reason, and sloth doesn't just refer to physical activity, it refers to spiritual activity too. You can be spiritually lazy, which is part of what Jesus is talking about when he said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. What's righteousness? Doing the right thing in the right way at the right time to the right degree. Do I want to be that kind of person? Becomes the question. I mean, it's like, I'm okay if I get there, I'm just okay with it, but, if I don't, no big deal. But Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. Now, the nuance that he uses here is an interesting one because of the picture that it gives. Now, for the vast majority of us, we don't know seriously hungering and thirsting. Let's be honest. I mean, we don't exactly live in a food desert. And yet, in the ancient world, because I don't know, what's the government got? 5 years of grain and dairy products or something? I forget what the Department of Ag had at one point. I mean, they had enough food in inventory to feed the U.S. population for a couple of years anyway. And I'm pretty sure it's still that way. And to take my little bit of a shot this morning, Shelley and I happened to watch something yesterday, a documentary on cruise ships. The biggest cruise ship in the world, but it took you behind the scenes to see how the whole thing operates, these 40,000 horsepower engines and the electrical systems, and it was actually pretty cool. But they showed the food service. What does it take to feed 5,000 people for a week? And so they got forklifts, they get this whole system, and the ship pulls in, they got 14 hours. Get the ship clean, get it resupplied, get everybody off, get everybody on, but they showed the whole system. They got forklifts, trucks, bringing piles of food in, and they're shipping, and they're getting it all, and how they got a system, all the dairy goes into this section, and all of meat, and all of the stuff that they have. And then they talked about how much of it was going to get thrown away because people would waste it. Okay, that is our modern world for food. But in the ancient world, there was no food security, and starvation, the prospect of starvation, was a real thing. It was a constant thing. I mean, not enough rain, okay, that's kind of an annoyance to us. Not enough rain in the ancient world might mean you weren't going to live and your kids weren't going to live. Everybody was going to die. And then as far as thirsting goes, well, yeah, you know, we know what it is to be thirsty. We're out working on a hot day, you want a cool drink, yeah, drink. But in a arid desert world, having water is pretty serious business. You know, you need to have water to live. And so Jesus ties this to the two most basic motivations that we have in our lives: to eat and to have something to drink. Those two basic fundamental drives. Now, as an example of this, I was just thinking about this week as I was working and going over this in my mind. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Band of Brothers. My boys loved watching Band of Brothers, and so they would watch it. So I've seen it a couple times. So, and for those of you that don't know, it's this series about it's a World War II war series, and it follows a company of guys basically from their training. They're airborne, and so all their training, and then they go to Europe, and they're in England, and then they drop on D-Day, and then it's their part of up to the end of the war of liberating Europe. And you get all the personalities and all this stuff going on. So anyway, they've landed, they're D-Day, they're pushing on, and I don't remember where exactly they are in Europe. They're somewhere in France or maybe Austria. So they're moving through, and they come up, to their surprise, they come on this compound. And they're like, what the heck is this? It's posts and barbed wire fences and guard towers and, you know, what? It's a concentration camp. And they didn't know anything about the concentration camps because word hadn't really gotten out. So they come on this concentration camp. So, okay, so they go up to the gate, and the German guards, they're all gone, but the gates are closed, and it's just, you know, they cut the wire and they open the gate. And they walk into this camp. And here are these prisoners that are so emaciated that you cannot believe they are still alive. And there's one scene where this guy, I mean, he's just a skeleton. And he's carrying another guy. And you don't know, is it his dad? Is it his brother? He's carrying this guy. You don't know if the guy that he's carrying is even alive, because you're just like, how can he even pick him up? And it's just all of these presumably Jewish, but they're these prisoners that have been in a concentration camp, and they're just walking dead. And so they go in, they open the gate. There's no guards. The people, they could have left, but this is it. You know, they're barely able to function. So the captain goes in, and he's got the guys with him, and he turns to one of the sergeants and he says, you take a truck, you go into town, go to the bakery, clean it out, get everything they got and bring it out here. So fine, the sergeant, a couple of guys getting a deuce and a half, they drive into town at gunpoint, they empty the bakery into this truck, and they drive the truck out, and they drive it back to the front gate of the camp. Now the prisoners haven't come out. The gate is open. And the prisoners are still just staying inside the fence. And they pull this truck up, and then a couple of the soldiers get out, and they get in the back, and they start throwing loaves of bread. They're throwing them out. And then this causes bedlam. This is a riot. There's bread, and these people are staggering out, their version of running, to get to the truck, and there's a mob around the truck, and everybody's trying to grab and get a loaf of bread, and they're just gnawing on it, and they're fighting as much as they can. And so there's a doctor, a medical doctor in the company, and he hears the commotion, and he comes and he sees what's going on, and he's like, oh, wait a minute. And he looks at these guys, And he goes to the captain and he says, look, you can't do that. You got to take that away from them because it'll kill them. They're so far gone, they can't, their bodies will not be able to process that. You got to get that truck out of here and you got to take that away from them. And so the captain then gives the order to the sergeant and his platoon. He says, okay, take the bread away, get away and get that truck out of here. And so these guys have to go up to these starving, emaciated German prisoners that have bread, and they gotta take it away from them. And here's this tough sergeant. He goes to this one guy, and he's gnawing at the guy. He says, I gotta take that, and he takes it, and the guy starts, no, and he starts, can't fight him. And he says, no, come on, you gotta, and he throws the bread. And now what they got to do is take all that bread away, and then they got to herd these people back into the camp, back behind the fence, and try not to hurt them in the process. And you see these prisoners crying and weeping. They want the bread. They want the bread. And they finally close the gates. The sergeant walks around, he has to get in that truck and drive it off, and he breaks down weeping at what he's just had to do. But you just see as the truck's driving off, these prisoners hanging on this barbed wire, these emaciated skeletons, crying, no, I want that bread. I have never in my life wanted something that bad. I cannot think of anything in my life that I have wanted like those prisoners wanted that bread. But that is exactly what that's the image that Jesus, when he says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. Because the word that he uses about hungering after righteousness is not just, yeah, I'm good with it. It's like, no, it's I don't want just a piece of bread. I want the whole loaf of bread, right? I want to eat the whole thing. I don't want just a sip of water. I want the whole jug of water as I drink it. It's that kind of passionate intensity that Jesus says, when you have that spiritually, you will be blessed. Which brings us back around to the original question. How bad do we want righteousness? How bad do we want the fullness of the Christian life that Jesus is describing, the kingdom life that Jesus is describing? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, because they will be satisfied. You imagine those prisoners when finally they were able to eat? We need to desire the passionate or the righteousness of God in our lives with the same passionate intensity that starving people want food. And then he says they will be satisfied. Keep in mind, it doesn't say they'll get satisfied or they'll satisfy themselves. It says they will be satisfied. Who will feed that desire? Well, the implication, of course, in what Jesus is saying is that the Father will. He will. We will be fed with the bread of life. Which is why Barclay on your handouts, if you look at them, says, happy is the one who has a passionate desire for total and complete righteousness. As the hungry man is passionate for the entire loaf of bread, as the thirsty man in the desert desires the entire jug of water. That's how Bishop Barclay translated it. And so it is a passionate desire. When we have that passionate desire for righteousness, then we will be satisfied. He goes on to say, blessed are the merciful. Now, what's mercy?
Withholding just punishment.
Withholding. Okay. So when you receive mercy, what's happening?
Withholding
you're not getting what you deserve. I saw some video clip, I don't remember what it was, but it's a traffic court on the East Coast somewhere. So, I don't remember if somebody sent it to me, but it's this guy comes in, and they had a video cam, he ran a red light. And they had the video cam, your license plate, your car, obviously the light's red, boom, you blew through, and it was a $250 fine or something. So the judge asked the guy where he was going, you know, in such a hurry. He goes, well, he said, I'm a veteran and I was headed to the VA hospital up wherever. And, okay, so you were late for your appointment at the VA. The judge says, so obviously you're a veteran. Yep. Well, you know, veteran of what? When did you serve? So the guy tells him, well, it turns out he's a Vietnam veteran. And so he was going to the VA hospital, some health things related to his service in Vietnam. And the judge says, okay, he said, I have a lot of respect for you guys, you know, and for how terrible how you got treated when you came home. And he said, how much money do you have with you today? And the guy says, I don't know, maybe $10. Not much. He said, I have my disability income and that's about all I'm living on. The judge says, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. He said, I'm cutting your fine down to $25. And the guy says, well, can I make payments? Can I break that up a little bit? The guy says, just let me finish. Judge says, let me finish. He said, I'm dropping your fine to $25. And then he said, I get money from people all the time that says, we have a little fund here in the court. People send us money and say, use this to pay the fines of people that can't pay it. So he said, I'm gonna use $25 out of that fund, and I'm gonna pay your fine for you. And he said, you're good. It's all done. You're free to go. So what'd the guy get? He got grace and mercy. He got them both, man. He got mercy because he was clearly guilty. He was clearly guilty. I mean, they had it on the video. Couldn't argue with it. He was guilty. So so he deserved the punishment that the state said $250. That's a fine, or whatever it was. I think it was $250. There it is. Boom. So he got mercy. Got cut down to $25. That's mercy, and then he got grace because somebody else paid the $25 for him. And Jesus said, blessed are the merciful. It's when we don't get what we do deserve. When we don't get what we do deserve. By the way, where does everybody in this room, including me, deserve to be right now? No. The pit of hell, absolutely. Every one of us deserves hell right now. How come we're not there? Because of mercy and because of grace. Blessed are the merciful. And so forgiveness, of course, being the core theme of Scripture, it's merciful, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. So we have all received mercy. Right? Yeah, inarguably. We've all received mercy. How good are we at giving mercy? Different question, isn't it?
We're still in training.
How much training does this take, Larry? even granting slow learnership to some people. Not you, I'm not implying anything, you know.
Yeah.
So I have to pick on you, Warren's not here, you know. So, the demonstration of mercy, you know, remember the parable Jesus told? There's this debtor who owes somebody $10 million. Whatever, it's an astronomical amount. So the guy that is the king, I think it was, that the guy owes the money to, says, fine, sell this guy and his wife and his kids into slavery and take everything that they own, and we'll take that. And the guy pleads for mercy. And the king's like, okay, you bet, I'll give you mercy. Wipes the debt out. No way the guy could ever pay the debt off. It was just astronomical. Okay, give you mercy. So then what does the guy do? He goes out and does what?
He assaults the guy who owes him $10.
He goes to a guy that owes him $10 and says, you pay now or I'll throw you into prison. And I'll, he had just received mercy. And yet he couldn't extend mercy. That's the picture Jesus condemns, of course, that attitude. One of the characteristics of a kingdom person is that understanding the magnitude of the mercy that we have received, we should in turn be merciful people. Blessed are the merciful. So what's it mean to, mercy? Tied into that idea is the idea that we sympathize with other people. What does sympathy mean? Sympathize. These are, by the way, are all review questions because I've gone over this before. Yeah, it means literally to feel with the other person. It means to feel with, to try to put yourself to the place where you are feeling what they feel. It's not sitting back in judgment on them, but it is instead making an effort to understand things. It's not just feeling sorry for them, but it's to enter their world to a degree and to a place where you try to see things from their perspective. Not in an effort just to wallow there, but an effort to help them out. So that's what mercy is. Jesus said, blessed are the merciful, for they shall see God. Happy is the one who can see with another's eyes and feel what the other person is feeling, to think their thoughts with them, and so treat them as they need to be treated. That's how Barclay translated this verse. Blessed are the merciful, so they shall receive mercy. Happy is the one who can see with another's eyes, feel what another person is feeling, to think their thoughts with them, and so treat them as they need to be treated. That's his description of what a merciful person is. Then he goes on to say, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. If something is pure, what does that say about it?
They haven't been tainted by sin.
Well, I mean, generally, if I have a bowl of pure white flour, what have I got?
Undefiled.
Huh?
Undefiled.
Okay, don't overthink it.
100%.
It's 100% with what else in it? Absolutely nothing. Yeah, it's pure. It's unalloyed, it's unmixed, it's uncontaminated, it's just pure. So all it is one thing. So when the word Jesus is using here actually refers to the grain after it had been thrashed and winnowed. And so remember, the grain comes in, it gets harvested, it's got a husk on it, and so it gets beaten and then thrown in the air, and the wind blows it away until you get down to the place where all you got the grain. There's no husk, there's no dirt, there's nothing else in it, there's just the pure grain. When he talks about purity of heart. Or metal, the metals that were used. So how do you purify metal? Heat. Yeah, you burn away the impurities by heating it up to a particular temperature. And so it's that kind of purity that Jesus is talking about here. Now, the purity is related to our motive. Blessed are the pure in heart. How often have you done something in your life with a pure motive? Not very often. Yeah, I mean, isn't mixed motive kind of the whole story of all of our lives? Everything we've done with some kind of mixed motive, even if it's, some of it pure self-interest and some of it which is really self-interest but under the guise of altruism in some respect. Yeah, but he says, blessed are the pure in heart. And so this is something, what is our motive for being righteous people? What would the motivation be for us to be kingdom people? And what is the proper motive? Do we want to get from spiritual infancy to spiritual maturity because it's the path to getting the most stuff and having the most comfortable life? You understand the question?
Yeah.
What should our motive be as we pursue the kingdom life? What is the pure motive?
Glorify God.
To glorify God. It's to desire God for God's sake, not to desire God because of what we get out of it. We want God for God's sake. We want to know God and please Him for that by itself, not because of the consequences that may come to our lives. The stuff we get out of it. There's plenty of folks that have undertaken the Christian life because they swallowed the message that said, hey, this is the path to peace and prosperity. Come to Jesus and all your problems go away, right? Well, there are people standing up willing to say that, but that's nonsense. All it means is you get a whole different set of problems. It's a whole different set of challenges is what it's going to be. And so it's the purity of heart. It is the desiring God for God's sake. And I think, biblically, I think a great example of this is Nehemiah. When you go read the story of Nehemiah, right? He's at the end of the Babylonian captivity. He's the cupbearer of the king, which other than the, threat on your life is a pretty good gig. It's comfortable if you have influence, and obviously the king trusts you. And so he's got a good deal going. And he gives all that up to go back to Jerusalem and get the city rebuilt. And all of the trouble and all of the trauma and all of the things that did that. And you're like, why would he do that? He had a good life. He had a comfortable life. Could have stayed back in Babylon where he was and just, coasted through. But he takes this project on. Well, one is, he knew God. That is the abundant message in the opening chapters of the book of Nehemiah. He knew God. He knew God was merciful. He knew God was holy. He knew he was unholy. He knew the people were unholy. He knew all that. You look at the amount of time that Nehemiah spends in prayer. The prayers of the book of Nehemiah are studied all by themselves. What he prays and how he prays and how long he prays for. He prays for months. He fasts and he prays and he seeks God, but what comes through is that he knows God. He knows God. And he wants God for God's sake. And then he also, when you look at it, he didn't take that position on for wealth or power or anything else. He took it on as a demonstration of the love for God's people. Why was he willing to forego all that? He went forego his own salary and everything else, and he's back in Jerusalem. Death threats and hard situations and bad conditions, and they're working from first light in the sky till the stars came out, and they don't even take time to take baths. They're working with a weapon in one hand and a tool in the other hand, and you look at the conditions that he's in. Why is he willing to do that? Well, not only does he know God, he loves God's people. And he knows God's people need this. This is the important thing. He genuinely wants to do what's best for these people. Not what's best for him, because it cost him a lot, but he was willing to do it for them. And then he was willing to be a servant. He didn't come in saying, hey, I'm the governor now, I'm going to be in charge of doing it my way. He's right out there with them. He demonstrates what it means to lead by serving. He becomes a servant. He knows God, he loves people, he's willing to be a servant. Those are his motivations. The love for the people is an expression of his love for God. The willingness to be a servant is an expression of the love for the people, which is a love for God and an understanding of what he's received. And so that's the great example of this. Blessed are the merciful, Now, does that mean Nehemiah was a pushover? You know, just tolerated anything? No, I like the one where he goes back and he's kicking this guy out, non-Israelite living in a temple, throws all his stuff out into the street and, you know,
Temple first.
just bangs people on the head, pulls people's beards, you know, he's a little rough. But not for roughness sake, because he understood the magnitude of what had gone on and what needed to happen. So the promise is when our hearts are pure, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. So these are the three lessons today that Jesus talks about in the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. We are pursuing this with the passionate intensity of starving people. And we are merciful because we understand what it means to receive mercy and the magnitude of the mercy that we see. And our motives are not for what we're going to get out of it, but because our motive is to desire God for God's sake. Those become the next three of the key attributes of a kingdom person, somebody that is seeking the kingdom of God. Okay, so one bell or two?
That was one.
Well, the second one's gonna come any instant. All right. I gotta make sure I quit, because I gotta go to work. Somebody would clean the coffee up for me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Let's close in prayer. Father, we praise you this morning for these words, for your words. And Lord, may they be true of us. May we hunger and thirst after righteousness' sake. When we understand the magnitude of the mercy that we've received, may we be merciful to others. Lord, may we want you for your sake. May our hearts be pure. May these words take root in our lives. May we live them out, that we would be people carrying your name to a lost world. Bless the worship service that's ahead. We ask these things in Jesus' name.